You're about to embark on one of the most stressful things one person does in a lifetime, and that is purchasing your very first home. You're scared and you're excited all in one. And in this video, I'm talking about the top 5 mistakes I'm seeing first-time homebuyers make in this market. If you want to know all those mistakes and how to avoid them, keep on watching. Welcome back to Colorado Living. I'm Nicole Baker. If this is your first time or you are returning, I make videos about relocating to Denver, Colorado and the surrounding suburbs. If you have thought about moving, I am a licensed realtor here in this beautiful state, so feel free to reach out. My number is popping up, as well as my email. I love hearing from you guys and I love helping you relocate to the best state that ever existed. I also relocated here and it was the best decision I ever made. But let's go ahead and get started. In today's video, we are talking top 5 mistakes that all first-time homebuyers are making and how to avoid them. Before we get started on the top 5 mistakes and how to avoid them, I want to explain why first-time homebuyers should seriously be considering purchasing in this market. The market is a little crazy right now because everyone is doom and gloom over the interest rates. Yes, the interest rates have gone up and you're probably gonna hear it from your parents, your neighbor, you know, the newsman, the newspaper guy, like anyone and everybody is talking about how the interest rates are so high. Why this is good for first-time home buyers is because when interest rates are low, people want to buy. And when you're a first-time home buyer, you cannot necessarily, afford to compete in these extreme conditions. When the interest rates for example, even a few months ago at 4%, right? Like that wasn't even the lowest, but even at 4% interest rate, people were paying $50,000, $100,000, even more depending on your price point over the list price. And sometimes that had to be in cash on top of your down payment and closing costs. I don't know if I'm the only one, but I don't just have tons and tons of cash laying around to afford to pay, so much over everybody else. So why the interest rates going up makes sense for first-time home buyers is because you are really lessening the buyer pool. And if you can afford it and if it's in your budget, you won't have as much competition. Yes, your monthly payment will be a little bit higher, but that is the least of your worries. I much rather pay a couple $100 extra in my monthly payment than pay $50,000 to $100,000 over the list price. If you agree, hit the like button and then I will know for sure that you guys get what I'm saying. But in this scenario, you want to have the least amount of competition so you can negotiate and do all of the things that first-time home buyers really need, like paying for your closing costs, or the seller can buy down your rate, or the things that cost money out of pocket that, you're already purchasing your first home. So you're putting 3% down, 5% down, and it's just a lot of money out of pocket. And I want you guys to not have to do that, especially when I purchased my first home. I didn't have all this cash to just put down. I barely had the money to do the bare minimum and like maybe get some furniture, right? Like I don't want you to spend every single dime and go house broke. That is not what we want, especially for our first-time home buyers. So that is my point when it comes to why I think it is the marketplace and time for first-time home buyers. But let's go ahead and get into the 5 things that you need to avoid. All right, number one thing that first-time homebuyers are making the mistake of is waiting for interest rates to drop. And that's exactly what I was explaining just a second ago. Yes, interest rates are a little bit high, but waiting for the interest rates to drop as a first-time home buyer is a huge mistake. And here's why. When the interest rates drop again, which they will based off other way smarter people that actually follow the market like that, like when it comes to housing interest rates, they are saying, you know, that interest rates are gonna drop within a year. And what I can say for a fact is when they do drop, there are going to be tons and tons of buyers re-entering the market and trying to purchase a home. That means that you are going to have 10 times the amount of competition, and again, having to pay over list price, out of pocket potentially, and getting no repairs done, no seller concessions, which are closing costs, which could be, you know, anywhere between $8,000 to, let's say, you know, $6,000 to $10,000. It really just depends on the lender and so many different variables like house pricing and all of that. But my point being is if you can avoid that as a first-time home buyer, in my opinion, that is the smartest move. And how you can avoid the, you know, whole conversation of waiting for the interest rates to drop is to stop listening to the media and the scare tactics that people are using to, you know, mess with the market or whatever, get views. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But I think that you got to think even past that, when it comes to interest rates, you can date the rate and marry the house. That is a common saying here. And what that means is, yes, you might get a 6.5%, 7% interest rate depending on when you're watching this video, but in a year, you can refinance and drop that rate down to the market value. And that means you will drop your monthly payment down. So if it was me, I would be willing to pay, like I said, a couple $100 extra a month to avoid extreme amounts of out-of-pocket cash going into my house. And then when the rate drops again, which is obvious that it's going to happen eventually, right now they are just combating inflation, and when inflation goes down, they will drop the interest rate back down so that they can keep the market healthy. But either way, you need to avoid being scared of the interest rates because you can drop it in a year and you won't have to deal with the competition of paying $100,000 over. You can come out of pocket less. I mean, there's literally tons of benefits on why you should definitely not wait for the interest rates to drop when you're a first-time home buyer. Number two, and what you need to avoid as a first-time homebuyer, is not knowing your budget and the out-of-pocket costs that come with purchasing a home. It is a lot to know, and I think that a lot of the times I've seen first-time homebuyers not truly understanding the costs associated and how much they will have to spend, whether that be your down payment, inspection costs, appraisal, closing costs. You know, there's a million different little tiny fees that go on throughout the contract that you really need to keep in mind, and also your monthly payment budget, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important behind the out-of-pocket costs. So how you're going to avoid this is get serious about talking to an agent and a lender on what these costs are that are going to be associated with purchasing your first home. The realtor will go over costs similar to, you know, not necessarily your down payment and closing costs, because the lender who lends you the money and gets you pre-approved will go over a lot of those things, but costs that are involved, like your earnest money. Earnest money can it's similar to a security deposit. I know a lot of us have rented at least once in our lifetimes. Security deposits and earnest money are typically the same thing. Earnest money is saying, I'm going to fulfill my portion of the contract here you are, seller, please take our offer, and this will be a placeholder until we close, and that will go towards our down payment. A lot of people don't understand that. And especially if you're using first-time home buyer programs where you don't have to come up with your down payment, things like that, those little costs really do add up. Things also like your inspection costs. There are a couple of different inspections that you can get in Colorado, one of those being a radon inspection where they test the amount of radon in, typically it's going to be underneath the home, like in the basement areas, places where it doesn't have the natural airflow that you might have on your first or second level. So things like that kind of cost, it adds up, especially if you do have to have that mitigated. It could be pretty expensive. Most of the time the seller will cover that, but that's a cost that you need to think about. Or just your typical everyday inspection, that could cost a couple $100s, and if you decide to cancel after the inspection, you don't get that money back. I mean, there are definite costs that come with purchasing your first home. Going into more of the things that the lender will talk to you guys about whenever you do decide to get pre-approved, you're gonna be talking about your down payment. That could be anywhere from, I mean, you could do 3%, 3.5%, 5%, 10%, and 20%. Those are like the typical numbers, but there's obviously, you can go in between those as well, but 3% of the purchase price, that's gonna be a huge cost at the end of the contract that you put down to, finish up the loan and buy the house. Also your closing costs, that pays for your lender, and it covers quite a bit of things, and I can show you exactly what those are if you guys reach out to me. But the closing costs could be anywhere between $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 depending on your lender and the purchase price. But these fees really add up, and my number one advice is please, please, please reach out before just going willy-nilly and looking at houses without understanding that budget. The budget is super, super important, and it will save you tons and tons of headaches. Leading right into the next thing, we are talking about champagne taste on a beer budget. When it comes to first-time home buying, we as first-time home buyers really want that dream home. That's something that we really saw in our dreams, I guess. Like, we envisioned ourselves buying for our first home. And I think that this is a major, major mistake when going in and looking at houses as a first-time home buyer. You have to really, really think about what you can afford in your budget. Just leading back to the last point, budget is super, super important, and your monthly budget, how much can I spend, or not even how much can I spend, how much am I comfortable with spending? Those are two different variables, because the lender might say you can afford a $500,000 home, but when you see that monthly payment, you are absolutely not comfortable with that, even if the lender says you are. So you need to know how much you're comfortable with spending on a monthly basis, and then base that off of your purchase price, and thinking about the homes in your budget and not thinking about homes that are outside of your budget, because it can really, really negatively impact your home buying experience overall. And avoiding that would obviously be number one, because you do not want to just, end up spending way past your budget or not finding anything because your expectations are just a little too high. Obviously, as a realtor, I want to get my client anything and everything that I possibly can, even if we can, ask the seller to bring down the price or pay for concessions or whatever it may be. I'm gonna do everything I can to get you the best house possible, but we also want to be realistic. Next thing that you want to avoid as a first-time home buyer is not understanding the investment side of what you are purchasing. I think that real estate, well, not even I think, I know real estate is one of the best investments you can purchase at any point in your life, and it is where majority of the wealth in America actually is. So understanding what you're purchasing and how it can actually impact you in the future is super, super important. Purchasing your first home is purely, in my mind, an investment. Obviously, we want to live in a nice house. Obviously, we want to do all of these things, but purchasing your first home really, really only sets you up for your future dream home, whether that be the next house that you purchase or a few houses down the line. It obviously will depend, but when you're purchasing a home, you're essentially going to be making money, and that house is going to be making money for you. All you have to do is make your payments. That's it. But the equity that you gain in these homes will set you up for all your future homes moving forward. So we'll just use easy numbers for the sake of using easy numbers. If you purchase a home for $100,000, this obviously does not exist in the state of Colorado unless, no, it just doesn't exist. Maybe for land. But purchasing a home for $100,000, no. But we'll use it as an example, right? So a $100,000 home, say in 2 years after living in that property, you want to move. You can now sell that house for, let's again use it as an example, $150,000, right? You can essentially, we'll say there are fees associated with selling your property, but we'll say you can make $30,000 out of that $50,000 when you sell that property. That $30,000 will then go to a bigger down payment for your next property. Then you could sell that house 2 years from then and continue to upgrade until you are in your dream property. A lot of the times people don't understand that, and I think that's a huge mistake. So try to think about the investment side and where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years versus the next 2 years, and I think it will help you really lock down on the investment side of this purchase. Last but not least, and the number 5 mistake that I'm seeing first-time home buyers make is analysis by paralysis. It is horrible, horrible problem when it comes to us as first-time home buyers. I did the same when I purchased my home. Obviously, it's a little bit easier for me. I was a realtor, but I see it all the time in all my first-time home buyer clients, and that is why I try to prepare you guys as much as possible so you do not have to worry about analysis by paralysis. I totally get where you're coming from. If you don't know what analysis by paralysis is, it is basically where you are just thinking of too much, so then you're paralyzed to even make a decision. So there could be a million different variables that this comes into play when purchasing a home, whether or not you can afford it, whether or not your budget is good, whether or not you like the house enough, whether or not a new home might come on the market the next day that you like better. It is a whole situation and tons of variables when it comes to analysis by paralysis. My number one advice, please take this, is make sure you're mentally prepared and you have an idea before even going out on what you're looking for. I understand you can't necessarily lock it in. You're going to have to see a couple of homes. You're going to have to run a few different scenarios, but try not to be stuck where you can't even make a decision because you haven't just sat down with your thoughts and really locked it in on exactly what you want to do. It does take, like I said, a couple times of going out and seeing homes, but once you've done that, you really need to sit down with yourself or with your partner or whoever you're buying the home with and think, what exactly do we want? And how you can avoid this again is just simply starting a list of absolute must-haves and what are some things that maybe we can deal with. Not necessarily that you want to, but again, back to the investment side, all of my points wrap into one. You have to really think about this as an investment. You're not going to necessarily get everything that you want in your first home, and you can always get those things 2 years from now when you upgrade to your even better house, right? So setting a list and really, sticking to that and not necessarily changing it. Obviously, depending on the market and the variables, we want to make sure you get everything that you possibly can, but having realistic expectations. Also, another thing is sitting down and talk to yourself or your partner or your family or whatever, and really honing in on the budget before you start looking, because it is going to be very disappointing to yourself whenever you continuously look at homes and you just start to feel exhausted. Another word for that is buyer fatigue. When you have just looked at too many houses that you're just like tired and you don't want to, you don't even know what to do anymore because you've just seen too many houses, there's too many variables. I understand it is one of the top 3 most stressful things you will do in your lifetime. So making sure you really have expectations on what you're going to do and what that first home looks like for you and your family is super important, and it will really help you avoid, analysis by paralysis. Alright guys, that's it for today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully these 5 mistakes really are going to help you, and hopefully you can avoid them with my tips and tricks. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like. Also, if you liked this content and you want more of it, I post videos every Monday and Wednesday, so go ahead and subscribe. But thank you so much for joining me. If you're thinking about relocating, my number's popping up, my email's popping up. Feel free to reach out to me. I love helping you guys relocate to the most beautiful state ever. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.